Deputy Speaker. Whilst I welcome the government's decision to finally ramp up some delayed measures yesterday, I'm not alone in feeling that it's left far too many major questions unanswered and a feeling that not enough is being done. In the Financial Times today, it was reported that our mortality rate tracker shows that we have more deaths at this stage of breakout except Spain. So a number of questions need to be addressed. Starting with parents with serious health conditions, they've not been told whether they should be sending their children to school or keeping at home. What is the government plans in place to do with those families? And what is the timeline? If they are supposed to begin isolating with their children, will the Minister explain what steps schools will take to ensure that those children are not held back at school? What about the cases of where the school closes and parents can't work? How will they get paid? And I would also ask the government to seriously consider the question of closing schools. I just had an email from my constituent today who said her son, who's at Salford University, was sent home for 5 weeks, but her disabled son, who goes to a primary school, still is having to go to school. These inconsistencies need to be addressed. We're also told that on the front lines, staff are not being tested. Can the Minister confirm whether this is true? And if so, what is the government's reasoning behind it? We need to know more about the NHS capacity. What steps are being taken to move beds from the private sector? And what's the timeline for it? And will the government consider the Spain's example? They've nationalised all private hospitals. And what about ventilators? To date, 69 people have died. And everyone knows that those who seriously contract corona, are going to need ventilators. Ventilators are going to be their saving grace. That is the one thing that will help to prevent deaths from taking place. But it seems that we may not have enough ventilators. Germany and Italy are ramping up production of the medical ventilators. They're costing about $17,000 each. And in Italy, the army is involved in the production line to make them. Can the ministers confirm, if these reports are true, that the UK has one small manufacturer of ventilators that has 40% of the market share? Will the government consider giving ministers specific responsibility for making sure that UK production is increased urgently and follow what Italy has done? We also have to deal with all the people who are vulnerable in our communities. Many people are coming together in my constituency to help everyone out, and it's great to see that community spirit. But there are people who are homeless. There are food banks which are getting shortages. What provision has been given to local authorities and other voluntary bodies to help to deal with this issue of meeting the need of the vulnerable group? Again, we need to know what is going to be given and what the timeline is. People have spoken about insecurity of workers and the issue of low pay and people who are in work. Insecure workers and those on low pay must be protected and supported through this crisis. Many people in Bolton are self-employed or on 0 hours contract. Now that the whole houses are being advised to quarantine together, many families will lose all of their normal income unless the government steps in. We'll all be endangered if those with symptoms feel unable to stay at home. Because if you're not going to have any money, you may take the risk to go to work even though you should be self-isolating. So that's why full sick pay is needed to cover the entire period that somebody goes into self-isolation. And of course, if they've actually been diagnosed with it. This has been done successfully elsewhere in Europe, and it's a responsibility we can't avoid. Further, some people will not be able to pay the bills. So what is the government's plan about mortgage payments, council rent, council tax, utility bills, VAT and business rates in these circumstances? Are they thinking of cancelling the debt? or say you don't have to pay for time being and defer payments. Rent and mortgage payment deferment options should be made available so that landlords cannot evict tenants and mortgage companies cannot take action against mortgages in these circumstances. The government needs to work with the banks and other mortgage lenders to offer mortgage payment. The same question about paying staff and bills will apply to businesses which have seen demand plummet as some are facing bankruptcy. How does the government propose to help them? How will the policies help those who run out of cash, a problem particularly faced by small companies? And also, of course, other businesses which are going to be affected. Now, at the moment, I'm somewhat not confident that the government will move quickly to provide the workers with the support they need over the coming over the coming months. Because so far, a lot of the announcements have not been fully enough, have not dealt with all these different issues. And of course, another industry that's going to be hit is the hospitality industry. Already, a banqueting suite in my constituency is getting wedding cancellations. They're going to probably go out of business. Pubs and cafes and other places are going to be closing down. They may well go out of business and all the staff will be laid off. And because the government has not made a compulsory lockdown, they can't even claim their insurance. And I know this is a question being already raised. I do want to know what the answer to that is. If it is to stop insurance companies having to make a big payment, then of course the government can come to an agreement with them. They can subrogate their losses for what they pay out, which is a traditional way of dealing with some of these things. We need full sick pay and lost earning protection from day one for all our workers, including the insecure workers, the low-paid workers, and the self-employed during this self-isolation. And the government must give quick consideration to this issue of compensation and how much. There are going to be a lot of job losses. That's why universal credit, which started out some time ago, but needs a real urgent action for rethink. The 5-week waiting time should be cut immediately and process of making the claim simplified. Will the ministers consider the requirement to be present for universal credit interviews, immediately suspend sanction and claimant agreements, and reduce the waiting time of the 5 weeks for the first payment? And also all those people who have to go on to job centre to sign on regularly, what are they going to have the job centres being told to say these people don't have to come out for the next few months for signing? Because that would obviously reduce the number of contacts. Now, I understand that the government says they're being led in their strategy by the scientific advisors about closures of schools or other places. But there were 200 scientists over the weekend who wrote and saying that this is not a good enough policy and that they should be considering the question of closing so that you can have the least amount of contacts going on. And that, of course, is linked with the airports as well. What are we doing in relation to that? As already been said, some airlines are going to be cancelling. Of course, there are British citizens who are abroad and who need to come back. What is going to be done about them? I know this was raised in the Foreign Office question earlier, but I think the government needs to come up with a proper plan in relation to all of these people, some who might be returning back to, or some people who live here and work here. Some are not nationals, but they work here. They need to come back. What's going to happen? You know, as somebody very famous, a political scientist, said, the first responsibility of the state is the protection of its citizen. And at this time, the citizens of the United Kingdom need their health and their economic health to be looked after. In 2008, the Labour government, to bail out the economic disasters, put in substantial amount of money. And I know people have made party politics of this issue, but virtually all economists, all World Banks and central banks of the world agreed that the bailout package that Labour did in 2008 did save our economy. We need that level of intervention now to save our economy. We need to ensure that our people who may be losing their jobs don't lose their jobs, that the companies will be kept afloat. We do require the government to intervene, and intervene not just in a few weeks' time, but actually today. Thank you.
Jonathan Gullis.